Right. So I've not really done any prep for this, I'm just going through. I've not worked out what I'm going to be saying or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to start off with Engineer. Engineer's my main. I think there's a lot of issues with the Engineer at the moment. So hopefully I can think my way through that as we go. I really like the Engineer though, even with all its issues. So, primary ability, if you've played the game you know all of this, but we'll go through it anyway. Summons a drone, can summon up to 2 drones as basic. Each drone shoots every 0.3 of a second, and at level 1 that deals 6 damage per shot. This is fine as an ability. I think the drones pull a lot less aggro than they used to, so the ability itself isn't as useful as it used to be for a defensive mechanism. And damage wise, it's fine. Like, it's free damage, no issues there. Free damage is free damage, it's consistent. My biggest gripe with it is this bit here. Every 0.3 of a second, 6 damage, 2 drones. We will be going through these later as well, but just a quick comparison. You have Nasty Image here on the Ranger. And this, I'd like to point out this, the Ranger is new, but this ability isn't, because it used to be on the Recon. This is a stronger version of it, but this, yeah, this isn't all that new. So your decoy, I'm pretty sure it's actually 6 damage, not 7 damage, but the wiki says 7, so we'll go assuming it's 7 damage. So it's already 1 damage more per shot. 1 damage you might think isn't that much, but it all scales and it's all more. Every 0.2 of a second, not every 0.3. So this perk on its own is just flat better. This also summons 2. So this on its own is just better than drones. Now, yeah, people will say drones are out non-stop. This has a, what, 15-16 second cooldown or whatever it is. On the ability. 16 seconds, yeah. But yeah, it's talking about builds, I know, but if you go down the correct path, that cooldown is non-existent. So you can have 2 decoys every single room exactly the same way you have 2 drones every single room. And then this one just deals more. And again, yeah, people will say, oh, but if we're talking builds, well, we'll get to that, trust me. Through the Engineer stuff, there isn't a build that's going to make you want to take drone builds. Like, it's horrendous. But anyway, yeah, so that's that. Reduce the cooldown by getting scrap. There's a few ways of getting scrap. It's probably my favourite thing about the Engineer of that unique function. Secondary ability, you shoot out a scrap blaster, which is a projectile. Apparently it's got 3-second cooldown. I thought it was 4, but there you go. It deals 50 damage. Again, just for a quick comparison, Commando's primary ability, 10-second cooldown, and 80 damage is just there. So this is only slightly less damage, and you can shoot 3 of them in the time that you can shoot 1 commando shot. So this scrap ability is actually pretty decent. And the passive is just if you use your primary ability when you've got 2 drones out, it heals them. That's it. Right, don't get me wrong, that's great. Compared to the other passives, probably not all that good. Class lock perks, this is all base information on all of them. So now we'll get down to the first perk, Baby Boom. Baby Boom is kind of cool. I like the premise of it. But if we break it down, it's a 35% chance to trigger a bigger explosion, but with 50% decreased damage. So you basically have a 35% chance to increase your first shot by 50%. That's how I'm going to take it. So it's a 50% damage increase, which is great. That's amazing. That there is the same damage as a mark. So marking a target. However, the problem with this is 35% chance. That could never trigger, or it could trigger loads. But it means it's really, really inconsistent. I've had builds lose where I've had amazing explosive builds and it just doesn't take off because you don't get the baby boom. The other issue is there is actually quite a large delay between you hitting your target and the baby boom coming out, to the extent where you've normally already shot the next shot that would kill it. The baby boom would then, like if baby boom's gonna kill a target, by the time this procs I've already shot another shot that would have killed the target. And that's on me. I could slow down, but he wants to go slow. On top of that, because of the delay, if you're shooting it at a mobile target, there's actually a chance that this baby boom trigger just won't hit it. So you get a 35% chance to completely fail to do any bonus damage. And this is in a world where the Ranger can deal increased damage just for pressing their... So for 9 seconds after they've used their ability, their javelins are dealing 50% extra damage. 35% chance, 50% extra damage. It's good on paper and I like the idea of it, but yeah, it lets it down. Explosion auto crit chance of 20%, that's amazing. That's really, really strong. That would be my main reason of picking Baby Boom up, is if I'm using an explosive build and I've got Bonsai Tree. You've now got a 40% auto crit chance, which is a lot of extra damage. Well, it's 40% chance for 25% extra damage, but it's decent damage. Group discount, explosion damage is increased by 30% when hitting multiple enemies. This is cool. It's a really cool concept, but it's really situational. It's actually fairly uncommon that you're going to hit multiple enemies with a single explosion, and it's completely useless against bosses. If this had a caveat of and 20% extra damage to Goliaths or bosses, that would be great. But at the moment, most of the time, I never pick this up because it's so situational of if I'm hitting multiple targets, if I'm not fighting a boss, I could just pick a DPS or a defensive option that's just flat more useful consistently. And this is what we're going to be looking at a lot, is consistency, because this is RNG based game and it's a roguelike. You want consistency over just like the occasional power spike. The Baby Boom is good overall, but it doesn't have that consistency. Drone Bubble. I think Drone Bubble is possibly... it's kind of joint first on potentially the worst perks in the game. So you increase your drone's health by 10%. I don't think it tells you how much health they start with here, but they don't have much. They have like 60 or something starting. So drone health increase is fine. It gives them a little bit of more survivability, sure. Using summon buddies, which is the repair method. Oh, sorry. Summoning your drones or repairing them gives them invulnerability for 6 seconds. That's great. The chance of your drone being targeted during that 6 seconds and hit is really, really low. Drones draw more attention. That's really cool. I'm not going to lie, I'm going to put my hands up here. I have never picked this, so I don't know how much more attention it draws. If it draws way more attention and you can make use of this, then it could be an okay defensive option, but there's far better defensive options. And then you get Tough Family. While Drone Bubble is active, increase armor by 30%, which is completely counterproductive of having your drones pulling aggro. Because if your drones are pulling, if this efficiency works, then your drones should be pulling enough aggro that you're not getting hit. So 30% extra armor is pointless. So you kind of pick one or the other of these, which feels really, really strange considering you can get both. So it's reducing your upgrade pool for things that are useful, and it's making it self-redundant. It would be loads cooler if this got changed. I think I've seen suggestions for this in the RoboQuest Discord, but something like, there's a couple of other like drone ability, shielding abilities that deal AoE damage, elemental AoE damage, or you could have it so if during the 6 seconds if an enemy hits it, then that enemy deals itself damage, or something like that would be way more interesting and would actually make me consider using Drone Bubble, because it gives you a defensive upgrade, it gives you an offensive upgrade, and then this is just a nice caveat on top. But giving you two defensive options that counteract each other is kind of pointless, which is why I never take this. Let me move on to Elemental Blaster. Elemental Blaster is possibly one of the best engineer perks. I think this or Elemental Master, which we'll get to in a minute. It's just really, really good. It's a shame that elemental damage or pure elemental damage builds are very weak at the moment because of resistances and how all that works. And if you want to do a pure elemental build, you're actually better off doing it on Ranger or Recon, which I'll explain in a bit. But yeah, like, Engineer isn't the Elemental Master at the moment. It's the weaker of the elementals. Even Commando probably has better elemental options. But no, this is really strong. So if you're using one of these elements, every time you shoot your blaster, which if you remember has a 3-second cooldown, you increase the damage from those sources by 25%. 25% is quite big for RoboQuest. Normally things like that are really caveated onto when they're going to work. And if I remember, this is the same as... the damage from this works the same way as sunglasses, so it's after all other multipliers this applies. So it's not just off the base number of the gun. And that lasts for 6 seconds, so you can constantly keep this up. And not only that, when you choose the element, Scrap Blaster will deal that element in damage. So if you pick burn damage after your first shot of the Scrap Blaster, all burn damage is increased by 25%. So your second Scrap Blast and all other Scrap Blasts, if you keep this buff up, is 25% stronger. Makes the Scrap Blaster into just like a mini nuke. It's a really, really strong perk. I really like this one. And then you have the upgrades, which is just increased burn damage over time, or basically increases the trigger rate by 10%. This is, it's whatever. This is the upgrade that you pick if you have no other options. It's fine. It probably would need to be 20 to 30% for it to be good, but then it would be bordering broken. weapon fire rate by 15% is actually really good. Fire rate damage buffs are kind of underrated. It's not as good as it used to be, because Engineer used to be able to do crazy energy build weapons, and they've heavily nerfed energy builds and that build in general with lock and load, which I'm not a big fan of, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's pretty cool. It's a very, very good perk. If you're doing an elemental build, this is always a good pickup, and I'll do it. Like, if I see this and I already have Elemental Master, this will almost be 100% pick rate. Elemental Buddies. This is fine. It is not an amazing perk. Literally all you're doing when you pick it is giving your drones an elemental damage. It doesn't buff their damage unless obviously you pick Burn, which is inherently a small damage buff. But it doesn't do any other effects just on picking it. So all you're doing is giving your drones an elemental attack, which is quite weak off the back. So this isn't a very high priority pick. It's kind of a, if I've got nothing better to do. Then, as with most kind of elemental based things, the first upgrade for it is just increasing the proc rates by just 10% again, which is 10% is not much. Proc rates aren't big enough really for 10% to be noticeable. The revenge upgrade is actually underrated. I thought the revenge function was pretty terrible for a long time. But there's some nifty things that this damage does, which the drone's shots don't. Like, drones don't get buffs off certain perks and off certain items like Toaster and stuff like that. So the Toaster, if you don't know, is you deal 35% more damage to any target that is burning if the attack was a non-burning attack. So if I shoot them with a burning weapon and then my drone shoots them and the drone isn't doing burning damage, it should do, what, 35% more damage? I can't remember the exact numbers. But drone doesn't do that. For whatever reason, it doesn't count as your damage source. It's its own damage source, so it doesn't get a damage bonus from Toaster. It does from some items, doesn't from other items. However, the revenge upgrade seems to get the correct damage from all damaging perks and all damaging items. So it's kind of nifty in that way. And auto crit and stuff like that will affect your drones and will affect this effect as well. So mobs hitting your drones and dealing themselves 30 damage that could crit, and that's just 30 damage at level 1. That goes up with your levels, so that scales real nice. On a side note, I would point out, you might think, oh, okay, so this has the effect that you were talking about up here that would be great. Yeah, them hitting the bubble doesn't count as dealing damage to the drone, so as much as drawing more attention synergizes with elemental buddies, the being invulnerable for 6 seconds is counterproductive to this. So there's no good synergy there. You either don't use the bubble and your drones are going to take damage quicker, which is fine if you're going for that, but then your drones are going to die and you're like trying to never use that because you're losing damage, which again is kind of counterproductive. This would almost be more useful if that just gave you like 6 seconds less on your ability or something like that. Like that's just off the top of my head broken idea, but it would literally be more useful than invulnerability, just for the sake of synergy. And then we have Elemental Master, or Elemental Mastery, sorry. This is a great perk. I love it. It's kind of the core of the Engineer. If you're not taking Elemental Master, you're basically not playing the Engineer, and you may as well be playing any other class. At the same time, as I said earlier, pure elemental builds aren't that good at the moment, and elemental mastery basically pushes you down being pure element. There's a few things they could do to easily fix this, which they've kind of done with Recon and Ranger, but obviously they're newer than Engineers, so I'd like to think that this is going to change in the future. It's something that Elemental Weapon does, that I think Elemental Mastery should do as default, basically. But we're talking about this perk. So what it does is when you pick this perk, you pick either Burn, Shock or Cryo, and then when you pick those, you increase the damage by those by 10%. 10% is not a lot, but it's something. It's a lower number than it used to be. I think it used to be 20%, so you could get 45% damage increase with just that and Elemental Blaster, which was mental. But it's a lot weaker now. So if you pick the burn, then burn damage has a 10% chance to spread 18 burn damage over time to enemies within 6 meters. I think a lot of people underrate this. This is actually really strong. 10% chance isn't much, but what you're not taking into account is if you've applied burn damage, then for 3 seconds, every second they're taking a tick of elemental damage. So every time you shoot something with a weapon, you have 4 chances to hit that 10% chance. Because you have your first shot, which is a burn damage proc, 10% chance. Then you have 3 sets of smaller burn damage that's proccing over time during the burn duration, and each of those have a 10% chance. And then if that does spread, that'll spread to a nearby target that will do 18 burn damage over 3 seconds, which then also each one of those ticks have a 10% chance to spread. So you can literally infinite a room, which is really strong if it procs. Like it is unfortunate that it's not consistent, but it's very, it can be very strong if it's triggering, and if you're doing loads of small burn damage to a whole room, then you'll very quickly see health just disappearing from a lot of enemies. It's not, people kind of look at this and think it's really bad if they're playing like big explosive weapons or snipers. It's not how you play burn damage. You play burn damage with lots of small procs, and then you just spread it across the room. That's the best way to do burn. And then you also don't want to target a single target. You hit one target a couple of times, you change target so that you're half healthing them all, because then there's more chance of it proccing and spreading, rather than killing one target, going to the next, killing it really as quickly as possible. But anyway, I digressed massively. And the shock one, again, damage increased by 10%, yada yada yada. This is an interesting one. I absolutely love this one. I think it's really cool, but at the same time it's really inconsistent and the damage feels a little bit lackluster. The stunning an enemy, you have 25% chance after you stun them to trigger a big spike of damage. This is okay on bosses if it triggers, but it's a 25% chance. Like, it would need to be 50 or 100% chance to trigger on bosses for it to be a good boss killing weapon perk or upgrade. And all it basically does is, by the time you've killed an enemy, by the time you've stunned an enemy, if this procs, it's basically going to finish them off and kill them. So you have a 25% chance when you stun them to basically kill them, which is fine. It's fine. It's fun and I really like it, but it doesn't feel like it's 25% chance when it's proccing. It feels like it's 5% chance and you rarely ever see it, which is a real shame. It could probably be 50% chance and I still wouldn't think it's all that good, because as much as I've just raved about how good this chance is, this is, you get, I don't know, if it feels like you get less reward for the chance of this proccing, so it's not as strong an upgrade. It's probably the weakest of the three, and I'll explain why in a sec when I go on to cryo. So the others, 10% damage increase, Now this is really strong single target. So burn is your AoE room clearing one. Shock is just whatever. And then cryo is your single target damage. So once you've frozen an enemy using cryo, so once you've got the frozen, once you've got the cryo bar full, then they're frozen, you have guaranteed critical damage. Now this is why I think stunning and the shock one is kind of the worst one, because if you're using any hard hitting weapon or anything like that, the bonus damage you're getting from this shock is going to be comparable to one of your crits. And if you've frozen a target, you're going to get at least 3 or 4 crits depending on how slow your weapon shoots. So cryo is basically just 3 or 4 times more damage to a single target than shock ever will be, because you're not going to trigger like 4 or 5 stuns on a target realistically, unless it's a boss and you've got a recon running shock as well or something ridiculous. So this is just consistently going to be loads more damage than the shock variant. And then the upgrade to elemental mastery. Now these are a little bit lackluster. One of them works really well with burn, and the other one is again okay with burn, but otherwise it's neither of them are good to pick unless you're running burn basically. So you have a basic ricochet chance, 25% chance that one enemy within 6 meters will take 25% of elemental damage that you're dealing. So this is really good in conjunction with burn, because you're spreading burn within 6 meters, and then every single burn proc that you get has a 25% chance to ricochet to an enemy, dealing a small bit of damage. So that and that synergize amazingly, because you hit a target with one burn, you have 3 chances to trigger that, and you have 3 chances to trigger that, and if either of them trigger, then it's just going to keep re-triggering itself, hopefully. So those two combo really nicely. You're never going to feel the ricochet damage with shock, and you're pretty much never going to stun a secondary target because of ricochet. Same with cryo, you're just not going to feel the effects of 25 damage ricocheting from this. It's negligible. It's okay, it's extra damage, so I wouldn't, it's like 25% damage to a single target near your target, so I'd never turn your nose up at ricochet. This is fine. Vaporize, on the other hand, is close to pointless. Again, the only use for this is if you're running burn, because these individual burn procs that are really low, if your target is at 8% health, then that small burn proc will kill it. That's great. And you can kill whole rooms with this combo. Like, that's how we do speedruns on Engineer, is this combo, because it can clear rooms when you're not even stood in them. But if you're playing the game normally and you've done either the other two elements, 8% health remaining on an enemy, unless you're using a very high fire rate weapon, in which case you're probably not using either of these elements because they work better for hard hitting weapons. You're going to kill them before they get to 8%. You're going to kill them at 10%. The only other time this is kind of useful is if you're running elemental drones, because then your drones have a chance to proc it. But purely from a weapon point of view, Vaporize could be removed and I wouldn't care. And what I think should actually happen is Vaporize needs removing. An elemental, there's a perk here on elemental weapon that increases your damage against resistant mobs. That should be part of Elemental Master. And it should be more than 100%, because both Recon and it's part of this, isn't it? Yeah, so Recon gets 200% increased damage against shock, Sure, it's more specific because it's if you're using your laser dagger, you do 200% more damage, but that's still boosting your damage against resistance mobs. And same with Ranger, he has 200% on javelins if you go down the elemental route. Which is why they're just better elemental classes. But anyway, so yeah, that's Elemental Mastery. It's very good. Core of like 90% of my builds on NG. Elemental Sparks is really fun and I like it, and the damage you get isn't to be sniffed at all. But it is a bit finicky to play around. So basically what it does is when you pick up scrap, you get per scrap you get 1 charge of Elemental Spark. Every shot you shoot consumes one of those charges, and it goes up to a maximum of 20. You can pick which element it is, just like anything else, and every spark at level 1, if you had this at level 1, would be 13 damage. So it scales up quite nicely. It does decent damage. It does more damage than drones, for instance, per shot. If you take into account that drones are doing 20 damage per second, the sparks I don't think have a reproc time anymore, so they shoot as quickly as your weapon does. So yeah, it can be a lot of DPS if you're able to maintain the stacks. Now the problem is you're getting 3 or 4 scrap every 3 seconds base, and that's assuming you're hitting a single target with scrap blaster. Sometimes you can hit multiple, so you're getting more, sometimes you're getting less because you're not hitting any, and you have to be collecting that scrap to get any use out of it. So it's fun. It's a little bit awkward to play around at base value, and there are some ways of mitigating it. Yeah, it's fine. Then the upgrades for it is you increase the damage by 100%. So if you had this at level 1, that would be 26 damage per shot, but you generate less charges. I think you actually get 3 or 4 charges per scrap, so I might have misled you, but the information isn't here on the wiki and I can't remember specifically. But the fact it says 2 less charges here, I think it goes from 3 per scrap to 1 per scrap, but increases your damage by 100%. So technically you could, if you're using, this is best if you're using a slow firing weapon, because if you're using a high firing weapon then you're actually losing per scrap, you're losing 200% damage, if that makes sense. So yeah, if you get 3 scrap per, or 3 charges per scrap, that's 300% damage. You're losing 2 of those, so that's 200% to gain an increase. Yeah, so it is, the math doesn't quite work out there for this to actually be an amazing pick, but you feel it. It's not bad. And this is where this here is, it's really nice way of maintaining sparks and you feel like you never run out. But it's a shame that it doesn't, you don't really notice it once you've got this and you're managing to do your repair drone consistently. It's really nice damage increase, but yeah, it's just not, it's one of those upgrades that it just becomes passive and you don't really notice it, unfortunately. But I really like Elemental Sparks. I don't pick it as often as I probably should do, but it's just because I find it a pain in the ass to upkeep the charges. And there are other ways of doing it. If you're going cryo, there's a really nice combo you can do with this, and yeah, it gets very strong then. Like, it's probably strongest on cryo. Oh, look, it does say, you know what, I'm a complete idiot. Yeah, it's 4 scrap. 4 charges per scrap, it does say. So that puts you down to 2 charges per scrap. Anyway, elemental weapon. I think elemental weapon is an okay. It's kind of terrible. It enables your build so that you don't have to have specific perks on your or specific affixes on your weapon, but it doesn't really give you anything as standard. So it's a really dead perk, realistically. But we'll go through it. So when you pick the perk, you then, as per a lot of the other NG ones, you then pick an element. Pick burn, shock or cryo. And that's it. That's all you get for that perk. Until you get upgrades for this perk, it does nothing for you. It just enables other parts of your build. But on its own, if you were to pick this as your first perk at level 2, you are getting no other bonuses other than being able to stun your target, slow them, or like a 30% damage increase over 3 seconds. Which is cool, but you can also do that just by adding the affix to your weapon. And if you're running cooking gloves, if you've got a blue weapon, you can guarantee get that element on your weapon. Yes, it does tie you into a gadget pick, and it does require you to re-roll and blah 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 blah, but this is possibly one of the most useless perks in the game standalone, and it doesn't even enable builds that much better than just an affix can on your weapon. And then the upgrades for it also aren't all that good. So every 5 seconds, so it's a 5-second cooldown, your next weapon shot will shoot a burning arc dealing 105 damage. This is similar to the alt fire arc shot, except you don't really get to choose when it happens. If you're shooting and you miss the shot that this comes out, you have completely wasted that shot for 5 seconds, which I do all the time. I get very little bonus out of this. It should be great, but every 5 seconds, that's one enemy a room, and 105 damage is a really nice damage spike, and it's really cool, but it's the 5-second cooldown that absolutely butchers this upgrade to being almost worthless. It always comes out just as you're about as the shot that you shoot kills an enemy, the burn arc comes out, or it comes out as you miss a target, or if you're shooting at range, it comes out when you're out of range of the arc. Like, there's so many instances where this upgrade does nothing. There are some instances where it hits multiple targets and it's dealing loads of damage, but every 5 seconds is a huge cooldown for an upgrade for a perk which does nothing. And then you have the next upgrade, which should be awesome, but it just doesn't work. It's not bugged or anything. When I say it doesn't work, like, don't get me wrong, it still runs, it still kind of works, but it increases burn damage by 100% against enemies with burn resistance. Now, if I'm not mistaken, burn resistant mobs take 75% less damage, 35% less damage, I can't remember the exact numbers. So this lets you deal close to base damage to a resistant enemy with all your burn perks. So if you run pure burn, this is where you deal damage. But they still won't get affected by your elemental weapon. So, well, they still won't get the effect of your elemental weapon. So you can't then stun them, slow them, or get the increased burn damage over time. So you are paying for an upgrade to deal base damage to an enemy. Not more damage. You're not doing increased damage to it, really. And I mean, I know the math works out where you should be dealing more damage. If their resistance is 75% and you're dealing 100% more damage, then it should be a 25% damage increase. But in practice, when I've shot targets, I do 100 damage to a normal non-resistance target, and then I'm still dealing like 70 damage to a resistant target, even if I have this. So it doesn't quite work out. And I think resistant enemies, like, I could be completely wrong on this, but from what I've witnessed, I don't think you can crit an elemental resistant enemy with an element. I've never seen a crit. It could just be coincidence, and I might be completely wrong on that, so don't put that in writing or in stone or anything like that. And yeah, the element bonus that your weapon gets for being that element doesn't affect them anyway, so you're not dealing extra damage to burn resistance, you're not being able to slow cryo resistant, you're not able to shock them. So this perk basically does next to nothing. It's not the recon where you're doing more damage to them, so you're able just to one hit them and get them out of the way, or the ranger that you're doing more damage to them, so you're just able to kill them and get them out of the way. It just lets you do almost base damage. That's it. Or, you know, you could just not take elemental weapon, have an element affix on one weapon and a base weapon, and then just kill that resistant enemy with base damage from a weapon. Like, for how valuable perks and upgrades are, this whole perk here is dead. Nothing is pretty much never worth doing, and I've tried over and over again to want to use this perk, and every single time I do it, I feel like pretty much any other perk would have been more useful, and just living with the fact that there are resistant enemies to some of my damage and just either slugging through and killing them eventually, ignoring them, or just having a weapon that isn't forced to be doing an elemental damage to something that it can't kill. We'll move away from this because this perk triggers me. Lock and load, it's fine. I'm not a big fan of this iteration of lock and load. Past lock and loads have been ridiculously overpowered. This is one of the ones where it's fine. Reload speed increased by 20%, doesn't feel noticeable. I still feel when I'm reloading I have to reload for a long time, and energy weapons now reload, and they take an age to reload, and 20% increased speed of 1.5 seconds, just it's negligible amounts, so it just doesn't feel like it's reloading particularly quick. Like, you can stack items up to help you reloading quicker, and at that point it might be useful, but it's very rare that I personally, some people might disagree, but it's very rare that I've had the RNG luck to be able to go through and get like a reload build running with lock and load and items, to the point where it's more useful to reload than it is just to swap weapon. But anyway, it increases your reload speed by 20%, and then it increases your fire rate by 40% for 4 seconds, which means you're going to then have to reload more often. You're reloading 40% more often, but reloading 20% quicker, so you're still losing 20% time, kind of thing. Again, maths isn't my strong point, but it is something like that. I really like fire rate upgrades in conjunction with one of the upgrades that you get here, which is infinite ammo. And I get why infinite ammo is only 1.4 seconds now, because it used to be 3 or 4 seconds, and we used to abuse it, and it was very, very broken. The problem is, with 40% fire rate increase and infinite ammo only being 1.4 seconds, you're still just reloading non-stop, and because this is attack speed and not actual pure damage increase, it just feels tiring having to reload over and over again. Like, use a whole clip of an SMG into one mob to reload more often. I really like fire rate, but it's just, it doesn't feel nice with this. You're better off just hitting hard. and then managing your ammo and swapping weapons, then you are using this for the most part. You then have gun diet, which increases fire rate by 25% when below 50% ammo, so you're only getting this half the time, which is fine. Like, as I say, I really like that you could get a fire rate build going on Engineer, and it used to be really fun. Lock and load doesn't enable it to be fun, it enables it to be usable but not fun anymore, so it is what it is. Family Swarm. This is another dead perk. So you'll note so far we've had 2 dead perks on the Engie that are just pretty much pointless taking. This is a third one. Lock and load I would almost consider a fourth one, but it has its uses. So yeah, Family Swarm increases your number of drones you can have. Awesome. It increases it by 1. That's fine, whatever. It decreases the damage that each one deals by 30%. But there's Reddit posts about the maths on this. Taking Family Swarm is an increase of damage, but only by something like 15%, I think. And then if you take this upgrade here, which increases the number of drones by yet another 1, but decreases by a further 30%, I think you end up losing damage. It depends how the percentages work, but as I say, maths isn't my thing. There's a Reddit post on it, you can go see it, but it basically is completely pointless taking. Like, this perk on its own is okay. You're losing a bit of damage, but you can get a bit of utility and combo out of it. Taking that, you just lose any point in having drones. Their only use becomes drawing attention. They're only going to draw attention if you've then also got this upgrade, which then means you have to have this perk, which means in order for this perk and this upgrade to be worthwhile, you need another perk and an upgrade that are also pointless. So you have to take 2 completely dead perks to make almost 1 perk work. And that's 4 levels. 4 levels worth of perks and upgrades. Completely wasted just to try and get the efficiency that you could get out of 1 perk on any other class. But hey, it might have another upgrade that saves it, right? Echo Buddies. Your drone drops 5 scrap and 5 healing cells when the drone is destroyed. So this upgrade for this perk is the only way those drones become useful. But this part of this perk means that this is going to activate less, so then this becomes a dead upgrade if you've got that combo that makes this any worth using. It's completely null and void. Any upgrade you can try to do to utilize this is counterproductive to having a drone build. Now, one saving grace. This here, I think, I might be wrong, but I think is the only pure healing you can get in the game. All other perks will heal scratch damage, where this can heal you back up to full health. That's the only saving grace of this, is it's the only thing that will get you back to full health if you're struggling, and you keep just throwing your drones in to die and then picking up the healing. The only use for it. 5 scrap is 5-second cooldown off your prime ability. 16-second cooldown, so if all your drones die at the same time and you had just healed them, you would be able to get 1 drone back instantly for all your drones dying. But it doesn't matter because the drones that you've got aren't dealing any damage anyway, so you may as well only have 1 drone. Like, 1 base drone is probably better than for family swarm drones. There's no saving grace. The only combo that makes this useful is if your drones getting shot deals damage back to them. But then the only way you can do that is you get this perk, which is useless. Then you may as well get this one to increase the number of drones so that you increase the number of damage being dealt back. And then you need this one in order to make it so that your drones are actually pulling enough aggro for that damage to be worthwhile. Oh wait, no, that counters all of it, because every time you heal them for 6 seconds, or when you summon them for 6 seconds, they're not taking damage, so you can't reflect the damage. So it completely nullifies any of the point of trying to do combos with any of the drones. I really want to like drone builds. Drones are cool as standard. All their upgrades need other upgrades that are then attached to perks which make them useless. And none of the perks are standalone strong enough, other than elemental drones and geared buddies. Like, it's just the things that make them, well, like, there's 2 of the perks that should make them really cool to play with are just so dead that it makes it negative to have. Anyway, move off the triggering. Then we have Fork Blaster. This is fine. There is a reason that it's in the state that it is at the moment, and that is because in the past we had upgrades like this for Scrap Blaster that made the Engineer ridiculously broken, which is the reason that most of these upgrades are in the state that they are. The Engineer has basically only received nerfs for the last 3 or 4 patches. He hasn't really seen any reworks. It's all just reducing numbers or adding caveats that give the Engineer a cool function but also a negative. Like, he's the only one that has negatives in their perks, really. Like, all the other classes, they don't need negatives, but the Engineer is balanced through negatives, not through actually good perks. But this one's cool. It's fun to play with, but it's not strong. So Scrap Blaster fires 2 additional projectiles. Their damage is decreased by 30%, so basically you have to hit with all 3 for it to really be good damage. Whereas before you just had to hit with 1, excuse me. Like, it's fine for boss damage, because bosses are big. And you generate 1 less scrap on hit. 1 less scrap on hit is negligible. You barely, unless you're really paying attention and you're really used to it, most people wouldn't notice scrap being picked up or feel scrap anyway. And you get 3 or 4 scrap when you hit something with the projectile base, so this just decreases it to 2 or 3, and then you've got 3 projectiles in total, so you can gain more scrap through this than with base. It just requires a bit more setup. This upgrade here further increases the number of projectiles by 2, which is cool, right? Yeah, you could like spray a whole room, but it decreases your damage by a further 20%. So 50% less damage, so that you can shoot 5 projectiles. So you have to hit 3 of your projectiles in order to deal the same damage that you would have been dealing if you just shot them with the base Scrap Blaster. On top of that, you generate yet another 1 less scrap. So you're now dealing 1 or 2 scrap. So you have to hit with at least 2 projectiles, you have to hit with either 2 or 3 of your projectiles to gain the base amount of scrap that you would have been. So this only becomes useful point blank on a class that isn't a point blank class. And even then, you're not getting that much damage bonus for doing that. So this upgrade And it's really hard, by the way, to hit all 5 if you go for these 2. Really hard. And if you only hit 1 shot of each on every single target in the room, you're basically doing less damage than your drone would do in a single target. Like, it's really cool, and it looks cool, and it's kind of awesome, but it's garbage. Once again, this is a perk that is okay to take, and this is an upgrade that if you take it, the perk is dead and is pointless, and you've killed your build. Now, taking this perk and this upgrade, and never picking this one, is okay. You can make it work. Using Scrap Blast has a 30% chance to instantly recover its cooldown. If you get lucky, you can repeatedly spam this multiple times and deal huge damage. As long as you never take this. Dead upgrade. So again, now what? I've lost count of how many dead perks and upgrades it is, or a dead perk if you take the upgrade, but I think we're on like 4 or 5 out of the like 7 or 8 perks that you get. It really limits your build, so I tell you. Geared Buddies. Geared Buddies is really nice. I like it. It's a passive increase. It's just nice. Like, it's just a bonus. There's no negative to taking this, and with how many dead perks there are, you may as well take it. And it's actually something that makes your drones useful. Now, it would be great if I could say, oh, and by the way, the damage from rockets, if you tick this and swarm, isn't nerfed by the swarm. It's still nerfed by the swarm damage. So you're still better off not having swarms and just having your base 2 drones, and you can still keep your drones alive without taking shields that doesn't give you anything. So it's a really good upgrade, and I'd actually take this one very regularly, but you still can't solely build around this and your drones. Like, it just turns your drones into passive usefulness rather than just passive a little bit of damage. But anyway, we'll talk about what it does. So when you pick it, a bit like with the elements, you pick one of 3 options. The options are: your drones fire an explosive missile that deals 18 damage. Bear in mind, all these numbers are base numbers. They upgrade as you level up. And that shoots every 4 seconds. Bear in mind, you have 2 drones, so you get 2 procs of that every 4 seconds. Yes, it can miss. Yes, the drone AI is dumb, so it's not consistent damage, but it is a nice little upgrade when it does hit, and it struggles to hit some bosses like Chaos Coaster. Javelin. Your drones fire a critical ray dealing 15 damage every 4 seconds. I'm not convinced it is a critical ray the way it's described here. I don't think it functions the same way as the Javelin affix. I'll have to test it. But the way that the perk actually is described in game is it is a laser that can crit. I'm pretty sure it has to hit a critical spot for it to crit, but that's something that I need to test. I might be completely wrong. If it's guaranteed crit, then unless you're doing an explosive build, the critical ray is a better option than the explosive, and I think it hits more often. I always take explosive because my understanding is that the critical ray doesn't always crit, and the explosive is more damage and is AoE. And there's more things that straight buff explosive damage than there are things that straight buff just pure damage. And anything that does buff just pure damage will buff an explosive damage as well. So the explosive just, to me, in my mind, feel more consistent. But I might do some testing later and disprove myself on that. Then you have Scanner. This is the bread and butter of this. Pretty much always take this first. You can get one of the other 2 as well with this upgrade here. So you choose another additional weapon for your drones. But it says here at a decreased fire rate. What that means is, if I'm not mistaken, these go to every 6 seconds, and this goes to every 8 seconds. Marking lasts 4 or 5 seconds, so having your drones shooting marked shots every 8 seconds isn't very good, because you've got a lot of downtime. And your drones aren't smart enough to go, one shoots and then the other one waits until the mark ends and then the other one shoots. They don't rotate. They both just shoot off cooldown. So you get the most use out of scanning if you take it first. If you don't know, a marked target takes 50% increased damage. So giving this to your drones will increase the drone damage by 50% per shot, and it'll increase every shot that you're doing by 50%, which is huge. This here, very strong. Downside to it obviously being that your drones, when you're fighting mobs, you're not really picking who they're marking. Even if you take one of the perks that we'll talk about later that gives you the ability to tell your drones what to shoot, then it's still not great. I'm just going to quickly change something. I'm not going to run through every single one today. Right. So yeah, it's best to take the scanning one first and then follow up with the explosive. Rockets is what I normally pick. If the critical one is guaranteed crit, then you might want to pick that instead. But those numbers will also be increased by 50% because of the marking effect. So it's a really nice combo. I really like this perk, and most of the upgrades for it are good as well. It's just an all-round useful perk, and it can go with any build. Like I don't see why you wouldn't take this on any build, unless you have a vital perk. So if you're running Ice Queen, which is a build and probably a video that you can look up. Unless you're running Ice Queen and you just can't fit this in, which is understandable. But yeah, if you have to and all the other options don't work with your build, this will always work. So the upgrade, as mentioned before, pick that one first. You can pick one of these second. Next upgrade is it increases your drone's additional weapon fire rate by 35%, but decreases the starting weapon fire rate by 25%. So what that means is their base shots are 25% slower, but the cooldown on these is 35% quicker. Up to you on if you take it or not. It's complete preference. I wouldn't say overall which is better or which is worse. I fairly often take it if I have no other upgrades which are more vital at the time. So that upgrade is a bit like Geared Buddies in general, where it gives you more marking, so it's not bad. It's just solid. Safety trick. This perk is completely busted on some builds. An okay pick on any build, but I only pretty much take it on Ice Queen, which again you can look up if you want to know what Ice Queen is. So you summoning buddies or using your repair buddy ability deploys and bubble around you that makes you invulnerable for 3 seconds. So you cannot take any damage from anything for 3 seconds. The ability that you have to use has a 16-second cooldown. So potentially off the bat, without taking anything else into consideration, you have 13 seconds downtime between each invulnerable bubble. However, bear in mind every 3 seconds you get to shoot a shot that gives you scrap that will decrease that cooldown by 3 seconds. So it's a lot less than 13 seconds if you're cycling it correctly. But if we're just taking it at its base, you have 13 seconds where you can take damage. Then an upgrade for it lets you turn it into elemental damage, which it's not bad. It's not amazing. It's not as strong as it sounds, but it's still decent. Again, this is base value, so it goes up as you level. You deal 15 damage of the element that you've picked every 0.5 seconds, so it's 30 damage a second, which is fairly good, within 7.5 meters, so you do have to be fairly close, but yeah, it's not bad. And again, if you're running the Ice Queen one, you would run Cryo on this, which then means it can crit. So that's 25% extra damage on top of that. So it's a good perk for specific builds, and a whatever perk if you want it for any other build. While Safe Trick is active, repair 5% of your scratch damage every second. That's fine. Like, I wouldn't ever really pick that unless it's all my other perk options are terrible, or upgrade options are terrible. It's something. You should be invulnerable enough where you're not really worrying about scratch damage anyway. But it's fine. If you need it, you need it. If you have it, you have it. Like, you wouldn't miss it. Targeting Protocol. This perk is potentially in the game because I suggested it. I almost feel like it should just be a passive part of the ability though, and not a perk upgrade. And it's rare that this perk will ever be picked by me. Your drones target enemies hit by Scrap Blaster with 100% increased damage for 6 seconds. Sounds awesome. Is kind of cool when it works. It's fine against bosses. But the drone AI is so dog shite that sometimes you'll mark something for it to be shot by your drones, and your drones will just sit there shooting at it from the angle that they're at, and that just happens to be there shooting into a wall. If the drones teleported to your target so that they shot the target, or moved to guarantee that they're going to shoot it, this would be a bit better. This is why this is only really useful against bosses. Also, when you shoot something with the Scrap Blaster, it's probably going to be dead anyway, so you're just not going to get much uptime against normal mobs with this. And again, 6 seconds is fine. 100% increased damage, by the way, is possibly the highest damage increase in the game for anything. Which is kind of cool, yeah. Your drones get 3 shots. Oh no, your drones get 3 shots a second. So for 6 seconds you get a lot of damage bonus, and you can 100% keep that up because Scrap Blaster has a 3-second cooldown. So if you're hitting the Scrap Blaster, the potential is there. And then an upgrade: hitting an enemy with Scrap Blaster increases drone fire rate by 150% for 2 seconds. That's huge, right? 2 seconds is kind of trash. I think 3 seconds would be nice. Then you'd have 100% uptime with it with base upgrades. You can still get 100% uptime with that because there's a base upgrade you can get for your Scrap Blaster to reduce its cooldown. Again, it's on paper it looks absolutely incredible and could be the best thing ever. In practice, it's not all that useful. Drone fire rate, by the way, does buff geared buddies. So this would mean that this is shooting quicker, which is really nice combo. I just rarely ever feel the use of it. And then this one's a bit weird. Scrap Collector is... I don't understand the point of it. Scrap Blaster hits drop 1 additional scrap. Like, that's 1 second off your ability. That's... or a couple of extra sparks. Like, it's... seems like a really, really, really minute upgrade for how important every perk selection and every upgrade actually is. And with the name Scrap Collector, like I've kind of talked with people before, and it feels like this should have the caveat here of your drones can pick up scrap. If this gave you 1 additional scrap and your drones were picking up scrap and your drones were flying to the target that you've shot with your Scrap Blaster, then you could make an amazing drone build with just targeting protocol, geared buddies, and I think scrap snacks, which I haven't spoken about yet. But like those 3 on their own would be an incredible build. Unfortunately, the drones just don't quite function well enough for it to be really good. And this doesn't have drones pick up. If that did have drones pick up and the drones were a little bit more reactive, then you could really make use of drone builds. But for me, for the most part, on paper this is amazing. In reality, I don't ever pick it. It's kind of a dead perk. Scrap snacks. I really like this perk. It's kind of cool. I enjoy it. But it's not always useful. The more scrap you're collecting and the more things you've based around collecting scrap, the stronger it is. But the strongest build for scrap generating doesn't have space to take this perk, which is a kind of shame. Kind of pick between this or the drone bubble. But anyway, we'll talk about the perk. So triggering repair buddy. So bear in mind that's triggering repairs, not just summoning a drone. It increases your drone fire rate by a further 50% for 5 seconds. That's really cool. It's just, yeah, it's not bad. If you've got a drone build and drone builds worked, that would be a really solid perk. Drone builds unfortunately don't really work, so it's mostly a dead perk on its own. Then it has baby swimmer, which then just adds the function of deploying a drone trigger scrap snacks, which feels like it should be standard anyway. So you're paying an upgrade to make the perk function as the way that it probably should function without that upgrade, so it's kind of a dead upgrade. I don't see why you would ever pick it. Your drones rarely ever completely go down. It's only ever really against Beetle Royale or the party room in Aqua Station that you ever really functionally lose drones. You pretty much have 100% uptime anywhere else on the map. So it's really niche, and yes, I would consider it a dead upgrade. Which, if you count how many times I've said that in the last hour, it's kind of a shame that you have that many on engineer. And when we go through the other classes, which I do intend to do at some point, you won't hear that sentence half as much. Like, you might get 1 or 2 upgrades that I think are just useless, but someone has a use in them. But the main thing that you pick this perk for is this upgrade. While it's active, increase your weapon fire rate by 30%. So if you have this, you have Scrap Blaster, and you have Lock and Load, you can get over 100% increased fire rate, which is awesome. It's so much fun having that much DACA. Is it functional? Not particularly. Is there better options? Yes, but it is still a lot of fun. Scrap Explosion, or Scrap Explosion. It's a really unique and kind of awesome perk. I really like it. I do not take it very often unless I'm running a cryo build or the Ice Queen build, which again you can look up. But it's cool. So it increases your crit damage by 10%. That's fine. It's more just bonus damage. Doing a critical takedown will trigger an explosion for 52 damage. The explosion isn't huge, so it's rare that that damage actually comes into play, which is a shame, but it is what it is. The main caveat here is that they also drop 4 scrap. You can get a ridiculous amount of scrap with this. So if you're running drones or if you're running cryo, this becomes absolutely incredible. If you remember, if you're running cryo mastery, every critical hit or every cryoed enemy is guaranteed critical hit. So you're going to kill them with the critical hit. By the way, drones don't get the bonus of that. So if a drone kills it, then it's not a critical hit. For some reason, they don't count towards that critical hit. But anyway, yeah, so you can get a lot of mileage out of this with a cryo build, and then you can either go and collect the scrap, or what makes it even more awesome is there's an item in the game called Plunger. Now again, talking about items and build with perks is kind of, I don't like to do it because you're not always going to get the item. Items are the biggest RNG thing in the game. But if you do happen to get Plunger, what Plunger does is if you get a critical hit, it lets you pick up the what they drop when they die. So the health orbs, it's meant to be so that when health orbs drop, you can just pick them up with a sniper, which is what snipers used to do. But it does have the function where if you kill them with a critical hit and they drop scrap, you auto pick up that scrap. Very, very strong. Yeah, really neat, really nice combo. With most other builds other than a cryo, it's a bit iffy to take it because Engineer doesn't have a lot of auto crit that he can get. You only have it off Baby Boom, which we talked about earlier, and the auto crit upgrade, which is just here off Scrap Explosion. So as base you can get 30%, then depending on your weapon you can either get another 10 or 20% if it's green or blue affix that will get the crits on it. And then if you get Bonsai Tree you can get even more auto crit. If you're really accurate and you're not using explosion weapons, yeah, you can kill things with critical hits, but even someone like myself who I hit critical spots fairly often, I still wouldn't feel comfortable relying a whole perk on my ability to always hit critical hits. Yeah, auto crit is nice, it's just a bit of extra damage on an occasion if you miss a critical spot or you're shooting a target that doesn't have a critical spot, which is quite a lot nowadays. This here is really strong. Critical hits have a 15% chance. Again, 15% chance is an unfortunately low amount, but it's actually quite big when we're talking about crits. Yeah, so you have a 15% chance to deal 50% increased damage. So it's basically 50%. That's the same amount of damage you can get from Mark. Like, it's a huge damage bonus. I know we talked about Baby Boon earlier, which is a 35% chance to do 50% extra damage realistically, and I talked negatively about that, but I'm talking positively about this. It might seem a bit iffy, but it's the other caveats to Baby Boon that made them less effective, like the delay and such, where this will happen, it just sometimes you'll just get a bigger number, so it's quite nice. Then you have neutral perks. All classes have neutral perks. The ones for the Engineer is drone fire rate by 10, increased drone fire rate by 10%. 10% is a minute number. If that was 15 to 25%, it would be loads better in my opinion, or feel loads better. And if drones functioned better, then this would be great if you're doing a drone build. At the moment, it's whatever. If there's no better options, go for it. Increase healing cell and repair bot efficiency by 15%. I never pick up Gluttony. That's just I just don't lean towards defensive options in this game. But if you need the extra healing and you have a playstyle that revolves around healing cells and relying on those, then that's absolutely fine. That's up to you. That's an absolutely fine pick. It's a good pick if you need the healing. And then this one's pretty good. Reduces Scrap Blaster cooldown by 1 second. That's really useful for some builds that rely on Scrap Blaster. Increases attack speed, just basically means the attack animation is quicker. Oh, sorry, I have also been giving misinformation throughout all of this. The damage numbers is based on level 3, not level 1. So yeah, the information is a bit misleading considering the skills are level 3 but the abilities were marked level 1. But whatever. So that's the Engineer. Very few perks that are actually worth picking. some perks that are okay to pick if you have no other choice, and then lots of perks which just don't function very well. I was planning on just going straight ahead and talking about the other classes, but I also didn't expect it to take me an hour and a half to go through the engineer. So I'm gonna jump in and do a couple of games now, and I'll probably talk about the other class either later or another time if people enjoyed this, because I'm going to put this on YouTube, because this is streamed live at the moment. So yeah, if you enjoy what you see and you want me to do more content like this, let me know. I'm happy to talk through the other classes. To be honest, if no one says anything about this and there isn't any breakdown, I probably won't bother doing the others. All the others are fine. They don't need an in-depth discussion on what's wrong with them. The engineer is a big one that has a lot of discussion in the community. So hopefully I've helped break some things down. And why should you listen to anything I've said? I mean, ultimately I'm just a person with an opinion. All of this is opinionated. So you shouldn't listen to me. I have a lot of hours in this game and I've played a lot of the patches, so I've seen lots of different attempts at making each of the classes work. The engineer is probably in the weakest and least functioning state it's ever been in at the moment, which is a shame. It's my main, so I've played it a lot. I've played it a lot more than any of the other classes, so yes, I'm biased. I want it to be good, but at the same time I don't like overpowered things anyway, so when engineer was overpowered I felt a bit bad playing it, and now I feel bad playing it because it's close to useless. But yeah, hopefully you've liked what I've come up with. If you have any questions, reach out to me on the official RoboQuest Discord, and I'm happy to talk over any of the balancing I've talked about here or anything else really RoboQuest related, or leave a comment below and I'll probably get back to you if it's a question, or I'll just read the comment and smirk at myself. So cheers for watching and have a good one.